Hi, Katina.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. I'm excited. I'm excited for this episode. It's been one that I've been looking forward to for a long time, that I wanted to time up specifically with some big things in the works for this guest. And the way that it all ties together, I think sort of what frustrates me as we are doing the things that we're doing is we're trying to legitimize and publicize and monetize a new media ecosystem of liberal voices, is that a lot of people act like this is a fad or this is a new thing, that using digital organizing and using social media for political purposes to advance goals, legislation, get people elected, is something, as Emily Amick said, that we just Christopher Columbus, and or that the right are the only ones that have been doing it. And that is so far from the truth, as evidenced by our guest today. She built the largest grassroots volunteer-led organization, and she did it a lot through a lot of digital organizing, through Facebook groups, through her own Twitter presence, and she had this keen ability to invest in both in-person and digital organizing, which is, by the way, the secret recipe to be doing both. So thrilled to welcome Shannon Watts. She is my mentor. She hates introductions, and anytime she has a chance to look at my notes before an event or a call or something, she 86s all of my heapings of praise.
I just have you say it's Shannon.
yeah, it's Shannon. But since my podcast, I get the final edit today. You have to indulge me for like 15 seconds. She's the founder of Moms Demand Action. She's the author of 2 books, including Fired Up, which is available for pre-order now. If you haven't pre-ordered Shannon's book, what are you doing? She was also named Glamour Woman of the Year, Time 100 Most Influential People. She raised millions of dollars for the Harris campaign. She changed the trajectory of my life and career, and she's the woman responsible, most importantly, for castrating the NRA. She's the reason every Democrat in Congress in recent history has an F rating, something that was not the case pre-2012. And she's been Demfluencing long before there was TikTok or even Instagram. Shannon, welcome to Demfluenced.
Okay, I have to say that one part of the introduction I liked was that I had castrated the NRA. Yes. That I'm going to put in my Twitter bio.
Okay, yes, and now I'll know the next time I'm introducing you on
just
a call
say that,
or an
please.
Event, that will be the one line.
That's it.
That's your Real Housewives one-liner.
Yes. Oh my gosh, The Real Housewives of Politics, that show would kill.
It really would.
I mean, Potomac needs to focus more on politics. That would make it more interesting.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, we did have DC, but then that got very messy.
Is this our new line of business, creating our own reality TV show?
I love the idea. We all get taglines and we pretend we're on a show. I like it.
Yeah,
I feel like there's enough drama to really fulfill the
There-
destiny of it.
100%. It all culminates each 4 years at the DNC.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Shannon and I, part of our origin story is kind of connecting over drama. We originally first started connecting on Instagram when I was working to pass the Illinois assault weapons ban, and we would trade messages here and there. But when we really started chatting, was anyone who follows us probably knows a little bit more of the context here. We basically bonded over kind of like the infiltration of Republican moms into the gun violence prevention movement. Remember when that was our biggest problem?
Oh, I really long for the days when Republican white women were my biggest grievance that wanted to get involved in a very messy way in gun safety.
Yeah, but we shut that shit down. And
we did shoot that shit down.
So I don't know how much of the story. Have I ever told you about this?
Is this the March 4th?
Yeah, but it was more them, and because they claim to be
Tennessee
bipartisan.
moms.
The Tennessee moms. And they go, I'm a proud Republican, but we need gun safety legislation. And they like did all this stuff at the Tennessee State House, and then they were so shocked when no one listened to them.
Let's just be clear. When they did stuff at the Tennessee State House, it was wearing like Gucci and Prada, and then they were giving money to that guy who would do the family Christmas card where everyone had an AR-15 in their hands.
Oh, I remember that.
They were doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
What a fever dream.
Yeah, it was so messy. And something that I think that, you know, as I was getting into the gun violence prevention advocacy space, following you really helped shape my values and the things that grounded me, which is our biggest problem with them was they were interested in advocating for one type of gun violence prevention that impacted them and their family. They weren't looking at it comprehensively. And in your journey, when was that immediate for you? Was that...
No. And trust me, I got called out the same way we called these women out, and rightfully so. You know, when I started Moms Demand Action, I was a white suburban mom. I was in Indiana. I was devastated and in large part got off the sidelines because I was afraid my kids weren't safe in their schools. I knew really nothing about gun violence, organizing, the legislative process. And it took a while for me to understand that, you know, mass shootings and school shootings are about 1% of the gun violence in this country. Not that they're not horrific, they are. But the onus is on people when they get involved to realize that you have to advocate for holistic solutions. And while an assault weapons ban, which Moms Demand Action has helped pass in over a dozen states, that's great. But it only really addresses a small percentage of the gun violence that people experience in this country, and most of it school shootings and mass shootings. So if you aren't willing to listen and to learn and not just lead, you know, a lot of times I see white women coming into the movement and they want to reinvent the wheel as though we haven't already done the work and we're like we're much further down the path on this journey. But I think they come in and they say, oh, I can be a leader, or I should start my own organization, but it's always centered around an assault weapons ban. And it's really important if you're going to get involved in activism to understand the data and the facts and to be advocating for solutions that don't just protect your own family and community.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to understand that the only way gun violence legislation is going to be passed is by gun sense advocates. And Moms Demand Action is a C3 and C4, right? Or is it just a C4?
And a PAC.
And a PAC. But there is work where you can be, and so Moms Demand Action doesn't say, well, we only back Democrats. They say we give you the gun sense candidate distinction. Guess what? To any Republicans.
Not many Republicans want it.
No. But that is also, I think, a missing piece in a lot of this with those people going to this guy's fundraiser. Like, they really think that if they're just pretty enough and sweet enough, they can change the minds of Republicans, and they can't.
The only thing that will change the minds of lawmakers who are opposed to life-saving gun safety legislation is the consequences of losing their job. That's it. And I would give the example of after the shootings in Uvalde and Buffalo, we thought the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was federal legislation proposed when Joe Biden was president, we thought that had a snowball's chance in hell of passing. You know, I had been sitting in the Senate gallery in 2013 after the Sandy Hook school shooting, and that bipartisan legislation failed by a handful of votes in the Senate, including some Democratic senators. Mm. And what we found out was the reason it passed in 2022 finally is because there was polling that Mitch McConnell saw that showed that Republicans were going to get wiped out in the midterm elections if they did nothing after those two very widely publicized national tragedies happened. And the only thing that lawmakers react to right now in this moment of bipolarization and extremism is losing their job. That's it. And so this idea that we're going to somehow persuade these extremists who, many of them, honestly, believe strongly in the rhetoric of the gun lobby, it's not going to happen. You cannot plan on Republicans and Democrats alike voting for this legislation.
No, and it seems almost like of another time that when that happened in 2022, I couldn't imagine right now in this political climate, even if we won back the presidency in 28 and we had the House and the Senate, I feel like it would be far down on the list, and I don't think we would get a filibuster-proof majority again on legislation. Like I think they think they're done for the next several decades.
I don't disagree. I mean, I never cease to be surprised in politics, honestly. Like, things happen, especially that passing that you never imagined and couldn't predict. But I wouldn't want to be an organization solely working on an assault weapons ban right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, or trying to fundraise off of it. Sorry, guys. We just can't help ourselves. We got to get those shots in. I love that for us. So take us, as we now come back to the thesis of Dempolins. I just love it. I can't help myself. But let's move on, and let's talk about the role of social media when you were starting Moms, the Facebook groups, your own Twitter, like how that all started and how that helped, hurt, what were the hurdles, all of those types of things.
I woke up the day after the shooting. I had gone to bed in tears, and sometime during the night that just turned into absolute rage. And I knew I had to do something. I didn't know what that was. I lived in a very red state. I didn't necessarily have friends and neighbors who I thought would be supportive of gun safety, or as I called it at the time, gun control. And I had 75 Facebook friends, mostly like-minded politically. I know 75 sounds like a lot. All across the country. Some I knew, some who I didn't, but I just had met online. And it was 2012, and Facebook was very popular among women and moms. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to create a page. I knew how to do that. I called it 1 Million Moms for Gun Control, not realizing 1 Million Moms was an anti-gay group that didn't want Ellen DeGeneres to be the JCPenney spokeswoman.
Oh my God.
And not really realizing that gun control was sort of verboten phrase, outside the Beltway or inside the Beltway. And so we course corrected and called it Moms Demand Action, which is something we chanted at marches and rallies. But that Facebook page was like lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. You see things go viral all the time now, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. But back in 2012, it was a whole different animal. And, all my public information was out there, my phone number, my email address, my home address. And so suddenly all these women across the country who had the same exact idea I did started emailing and calling and messaging me. And at the same time, so did gun extremists, right? I started getting threats of death and sexual violence right away. But also media paid attention back in the day to Facebook. And we created a main page for Moms Demand Action. Then we created a state page for every single state. So we knew we wanted to organize as chapters. Because Facebook was really built for this organizing, we were able to create private pages where you could have conversations about events or things that had happened and not have gun extremists see what you were talking about. So that was incredibly useful. And, for the first 7 or 8 years, that was key to our ability to amass volunteers and to show up at events and to really create this national network. And then on top of that, one day I got a DM on Facebook from Sarah Brady. And for anyone who doesn't know, Sarah Brady was married to James Brady, who was shot when Reagan was president and grievously wounded. And she just messaged me. And I think Sarah Brady must have been in her 60s, if not 70s at the time. And she said, "Why aren't you on Twitter?" I didn't really even know what Twitter was. And so it was because of that DM that I created a Twitter handle. And obviously we created one for Moms Demand Action too. But because of my training in journalism and communications, like I was a duck to water with Twitter. I knew how to create a short, pithy zinger. And that really became my platform of choice over the years. And then eventually, we certainly used Instagram, and Zoom was incredibly important to us during the pandemic. But I don't know even now, my inspiration was Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I'm not even sure how they did it back in the day.
Yeah.
Like, did they call each other on their rotary phones? Did they use snail mail? Did they all carpool to the Capitol? How those women achieved what they did in a decade is amazing.
I know, like that actually, I cannot imagine starting an organization or a movement that big and not having that kind of infrastructure. And also, as you mentioned, the privacy that Facebook offered, and then just the ability to connect. They didn't have email either. Like
no email.
Well, they also had really no opposition. Like, who was against drunk driving? And I think that's a really big difference in Moms Demand Action, right? There's billions of dollars that run through the gun lobbies that are, able to get involved and squash any sort of legislation. No one's against drunk driving.
The alcohol lobby was pretty powerful.
Okay, that's actually something I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Did the alcohol lobby, I don't even know, did they get involved in trying to
Yes,
stop
very
moms
much.
against
And in
drunk
fact,
driving?
this is interesting. The woman who founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Candace Lightner, whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver, ended up being a lobbyist for the alcohol industry because she felt Mothers Against Drunk Driving went too far and was prohibitionist.
Whoa.
That would be like me going to work for the NRA.
That just popped into my head.
Well, because
Can
I
you
was thinking,
imagine?
like, those, I sat through the Moms Against Drunk Driving, like, presentations while I was at school. And I was just thinking, could you imagine having a Moms on Demand presentation at, like, our high school? Like, that would never happen because of how polarizing gun.
Well, but we do table in schools and police stations and stuff with Be Smart.
Right, but like a full assembly. I mean, I feel like there would be so much 100%.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, because your organization reminds me so much of what I was going to when I was in school, which was Moms Against Drunk Driving.
Right. I mean, it's become the level at which this
or Dare,
this
the drugs one. I think.
Yes.
Dare, yeah.
Gun violence prevention has become such a calcified, politicized, bifurcating issue is kind of insane. And because things that some of those groups that we referenced in our beginning little bit of snark, they say things like, well, this is something the majority of Americans want. And that is true. But then you have lawmakers and a lobby that are incredibly powerful, and they speak for them, right?
Well, and the other thing is that the NRA watched and learned from the tobacco lobby's mistakes, the liquor industry's mistakes, very powerful special interests that ended up being overruled by activist sentiment and eventually lawmaking. And the NRA watched very closely as they became more of a radicalized organization starting in the 70s. And what they learned was that the quickest way to lose your power is to get sued into oblivion, which is what happened with drunk driving, and it's what happened with tobacco. And so they were able to extract from Congress in the 90s a special provision that protected them from being sued for the manufacture of the products. The only manufacturing industry, guns, is protected. Not toys.
Right.
Nothing else, just guns.
Yeah. Car seats, everything. Everyone else, if your product kills people.
Yeah.
But the argument for in PLACA, like when you read what the lawyers for the gun lobby argued was, well, that they're meant to kill people. Like, that's the point. You can't sue us because people died. That's the point. And that won.
So, and maybe, Shannon, would you mind just like running through what does gun safety really mean? What does common sense gun laws really mean? Just because I think that there's a lot of words that are thrown around, and I think that it would be really helpful kind of just to define what, in the capacity of what you're doing, what that really looks like.
Yeah, we are not anti-gun, not against the Second Amendment. There are 400 million plus guns in this country. We're not putting that toothpaste back in the tube. This is really about restoring the responsibilities that should go along with gun rights. And that is something the gun lobby and the gun extremists that they created have worked very hard for the last decade to remove, right? So the goal of the gun industry is to remove the protections that make it more difficult for dangerous people to access guns, whether that's background checks, permitting, training, secure storage, all of the things that even responsible gun owners understand are an important part of being a gun owner. They want to strip those away because why? They will sell more guns. And what's truly Machiavellian is that, the more guns are easily accessible and stolen, the more people feel like they need guns to protect themselves. I mean, that is really the goal here, is to create an environment of fear so that it is perfectly normal for everyone to own an arsenal, because that enriches the gun industry. I know it sounds over the top, but it is absolutely true. The reason that we see this proliferation of semi-automatic rifles in this country is because at some point the gun lobby saw there was going to be an oversaturation of handguns. So what do when you're sold handguns to everyone who will buy them?
Wow.
Well, you do market them to women, and you do try to put them in yoga pants, and you do sell them to, the LGBTQ community, and you do tell Black people and people of color that they need guns to protect themselves. But you also sell semi-automatic rifles at a higher price point.
Right.
They're doing...
This is the plan.
Yeah. For the
marketing plan.
Women in yoga pants thing that you said, I have seen so much content on TikTok of like young runners that are going to work out, and they will be like, and you didn't think I could carry with my leggings on.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
see
such
moms
propaganda. It's
like
crazy.
a TikTok of a mom in Costco, like showing it, she's got her 2 kids in the Costco thing and like opening up her pouch like that. Like, your 2-year-old's going to grab that, you idiot. It's truly insane. And also, what is really interesting about gun violence prevention advocacy, is that it is such an intersection of so many different areas of politics. So public health, civil rights, the way like in education, entrenched racism, like a big part of the gun violence prevention movement is, as you were talking about, fear and racism sell guns. That is something that they really rely on, and it's something that I think Republicans, they used immigration and crime to push a false narrative and instill fear in people and win this election. So I feel like the 10 years at Moms, all of these different things kind of crossed into the work that you were doing. And was that part of the decision? Was it 22 or 23? 23, right? You were 11 years, because that's our lucky number. We raised $11 million to kind of start the next chapter.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is not easy to be a full-time volunteer for 11 years leading an organization that is focused on, one of the most difficult political issues of our time. Obviously, it was rewarding, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience. But I went into it with this feeling that, power is finite. Mm-hmm. I wish members of Congress and people at corporations felt the same way. I don't believe anyone should do a job, honestly, for more than 8 years. That kind of overstayed my welcome, I think, in a lot of ways. I just think you get out of ideas and juice, and it's sort of time to reassess and figure out what's next for you. So I made it a practice every year to ask myself, is this the year I step back, knowing that I would eventually? And in the early years, it was no or maybe. And then when I was standing at the Rose Garden in 2022 and President Biden signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law, I just thought, this is the bookend to my activism. It's time to hand over the baton and try something else.
So we've got book number 1 over there, Fight Like a Mother. And in a couple of weeks, out will come Fired Up. So we're very excited. First of all, we are going to be hosting, if you're in the Chicagoland area, we're going to be hosting an event in Winnetka on June 24th. We're going to have a conversation with Shannon. It's going to be a great bringing together of so many people who've worked in the gun violence prevention movement, or people who our paths crossed during the election, during the Harris campaign. And then I hope new people, new friends, people that want to get involved. It is open to all, and we will put the link to buy tickets in our show notes. But I'm so excited to read this book, and I wanted to kind of get into some fire starter questions. You talk about the fire starter formula and how that impacted you, and how women can start their fire and come alive at any age. What is, without giving too much away, because you got to read the book, what is your fire starter formula?
I did not figure out what made me come alive until I was in my 40s and I started Moms Demand Action. I talk about in the book that, I had a career I didn't love. I had to do it out of necessity. I had a marriage that was not a good fit. And I had 3 kids by the time I was 30. And I just was sort of like living on autopilot. And I found myself in an emergency room in my 30s, mid 30s, and I was just covered head to toe in eczema. And all of the bad decisions I made were sort of burning me from the inside out. And a doctor, very earnestly looked at me and asked me how much stress I was under, and I kind of cracked and realized I was at a crossroads. You know, I could continue what I'd been doing and feel the same way I felt, or I could try something else. And I spent the next 5 or so years trying different things. I left my marriage. I quit my job. I started a small business. I tried to become a yoga teacher, which, if you know me, is laughable. I, was a consultant. I did all these different things, and some of them I failed at, but some of them I really started to enjoy. I became a practicing Buddhist. And it wasn't until I remarried, I had stayed at home for a few years, I had really time to think about who I was and what I wanted, that I was ready to meet the moment with Moms Demand Action. And this formula, I should say, is to help women stop focusing on just fulfilling their obligations and think about fulfilling their desires. Men are told to fulfill their desires. Women are told to fulfill their obligations. Mm-hmm. And so I want women to live as if one of the most important questions they can ask themselves is, what do I want? I mean, we don't do that because we're weak. It's because we're wise. The whole system is set up for women to fulfill their obligations. What would happen if we asked ourselves, what I want? What do I want? Like, governments would topple, systems would fail, families would fall apart, mm-hmm. right? And so I think it's really important to constantly be asking yourself, what do I want? And then this formula that I've learned, not only with myself, but I've seen it with hundreds and hundreds of other women in my career in activism, is that when you marry your values, which you may not even know what those are, but they change throughout your life. Your abilities, those are something that are innate to you or acquired, but that make you different than other people, right? For me, it's my communications skills. And then your desires. What do you truly want? Who are you? What do you want to become? And that changes throughout your life too. So if I go back to Moms Demand Action and starting it, my values were protecting my family and my community at that point in my life, because I had little kids, elementary through high school. My abilities were my communication skills, and my desire was to be socially involved. I had been raised in Rochester, New York, where I was taught that people like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony, who all came through my city, were heroes to be emulated. But now that I'm a 54-year-old empty nester who, is thinking about what's next in my life, my values, my abilities, and my desires might be different.
Yeah.
And I interviewed over 70 women for this book. And so I tell a lot of their stories, and they're just incredible. If you are a woman who is thinking it's not worth it, or you don't deserve it, or it's too late, like, none of that is true.
Absolutely. And for those of us, so in the last year, as I said in the intro, one of the most kind of transformational parts of my life as I started activism, and then as we raised for the Harris campaign, and everything that's come since then, has been having your mentorship and your guidance. But for those of us that didn't somehow slide into your DMs and get that immense pleasure, a privilege, part of pre-ordering Fired Up is that you get admittance to Firestarter University. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. The metaphor in my book is obviously living on fire. And that's really just this idea of figuring out two things: what is limiting you and what is calling you. And it is a practice. It is a discipline to keep doing throughout your life. And it is very difficult to live on fire by yourself. You really need a community. I learned that through Moms Demand Action. A supportive community will really help you figure out who you are and what you want. And so I want the people who pre-order this book to enroll for free in Firestarter University, which will start in September. It's an online community and course. And together with hundreds of other women who have already enrolled, go through the book and actually live the book together and do the exercises and do the prompts and practice. I think that not only will this community help you figure it out through the book, they'll be with you afterward. And I've written a lot about this on Substack, but, having friends later in life is not easy. It is, if you're moving around or your kids aren't in school anymore, like, finding friendship in midlife can be a struggle, especially post-pandemic. So I'm hoping that this built-in community of Firestarters will help people figure that out through the book, but also in real life.
I love that.
Yeah. Especially it's also hard to find friends that share your values. As your value systems maybe change or solidify or become that much more important, there are likely friendships that maybe you seem to outgrow. Certainly our current political climate, I know I have friends from college that I'm just like, I can't, bro. Like, I don't know what to talk to you about. Like, especially given what I do, it's just like, it feels so empty. And I'm so grateful that I have had activism and friends that I've made through my political involvement, because you need that those people that care deeply in the same way that you do about things. And I think this is such a great opportunity for people to find their people, to and also to, in their community, like start a book club, read this book, find, you have that community online. But just like Moms Demand, it was equally as important to take that offline, to meet in real life, to show up at these state houses, and to not just be posting and retweeting, but to go and actually show up and do the actual work, which is something that we did a lot of together. So to kind of take us back to our journey, we, as I mentioned, met during the passage of the Illinois assault weapons ban and started talking more. And I then asked you if you would come do as a surrogate for a then Biden fundraiser. And you said yes, and you flew to Chicago, and it was like the most exciting, nerve-wracking day of my life, also because it was right after the debate. So this was this time between the debate and the step down.
Liz could not be shaken. She could not be convinced that Joe Biden might not be the candidate.
I was like the party line. I got that eldest daughter. Virginia was
they told me he was going to run, and so I said he's going to run. Give me money.
And honestly, like, what? In hindsight, what else are you gonna do at the fundraiser? Be like,
I was like, we're raising money, can go to whoever.
Yeah, but it could only have gone to Harris. And they were like, don't say that. So I was trying.
How many days was that between the debate and the step down?
It was like 3 weeks.
I was in the other room watching. Wasn't there another debate that night?
He was delivering a speech on foreign policy.
That was it.
Which wasn't terrible, but it was really bad. But it was also, it felt like such, little did I know how, and this is, I feel like, a life lesson. You think that something is going to be the culmination. Like, Shannon's here and we're doing this fundraiser and it's raising $100,000. This is like peak of my life. And people and everybody's trying to ruin it because they're pissed about Joe Biden. Little did I know what would happen just several days later. I think it was only like a week or two later. So that was terrible. I was so excited. I'll never forget walking in Lauren Harper's house, and I was like, oh my God, Shannon's here. This is so exciting. And everyone's like bombarding me, like, he needs to step down. What are we doing here, Liz? I'm like I have a bat phone to the White House. I can't do anything.
What are you gonna do? Like, what alternative do we have in this exact?
Shut up and eat a meatball and give some money, thanks. And and as we start to get into our DNC of it all, I do to always try to lead with party unity. Yet I believe there are times for dissension. So that event happens. It was great. I laughed. I cried. And then a week later, Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, and Shannon wakes up at 5 a.m. and take us through your morning.
Well, thank you, menopause. I often wake up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And I had seen that an organization called Win with Black Women a couple of days before had a call. It was like a standard call they have every Sunday, but because Harris was suddenly the nominee, there were thousands and thousands of people on it. And it was so exciting because people were reporting on Instagram and Twitter like, oh my God, now 1,000, now 2. And it just kept going up and up. And now we've raised over $1 million. And I just thought that was so impressive and so incredible, and really testament to the community of Black women that they had built with Win with Black Women. And then the next day, a group of Black men did something similar and had even more people and raised even more money. So I decided to tweet, when are white women going to honor and emulate these calls and do the same thing? And it was, not unlike Moms Demand Action in that the response was quite overwhelming. And everyone assumed that tweet meant that I was going to organize it. And so I started getting a lot of pressure to actually do it. And I called a bunch of, I don't know, like 3 or 4 women that I thought of as being highly type A and executive functioning who could help me create this event. And you were one of those people. And they all said yes. And then we had like influencers, Glennon Doyle and others say that they were in too. And I sat in a chair in my office for 3 days while my husband brought me liquids. And we just planned this what ended up being the most people ever to be on a Zoom. We broke that record. And then we raised like $11 million in 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It was wild. And there was at one point when we were planning this, Shannon goes, well, somebody should be the MC and like the theater can, I'll do it. And
I love a microphone.
And then, an hour before we start, I'm like, oh my God. My mom literally says, with the exception of Taylor Swift, it's like you wrote down your favorite people in politics and entertainment and sports. And I've been, Abby Wambach is my dad's favorite soccer player. Megan Rapinoe is my favorite soccer player. Connie Britton is my favorite actress. Kirsten Gillibrand was my senator for 10 years, and I'm obsessed with her. Mallory McMorrow, Pink,
from her private jet, right?
From her private jet.
That was nuts.
My kids know like 2 celebrities other than Daniel Tiger. It's Taylor Swift and Pink. Like they got to wave to her at the end. In that order. Sorry, Pink. It was insane, incredible. The amount of just energy and excitement for this candidate was so palpable. It felt
it was a breath of fresh air into like the wings of the Democratic Party that I think everyone felt so almost paralyzed by the predicament that we were in. Yeah. I would love to go back to that feeling.
I know.
It felt so good.
I'll forever be chasing that high. Yeah. But to go back a little, do you remember in the first probably half of the first day, a lot of people told us not to do it?
That's the story of my life. I come up with ideas and there are a lot of people who tell me not to do it.
They were like, this isn't the vibe. You can't just, it was like that line from Mean Girls. Oh my God.
That was through the whole thing. It wasn't just the first day.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we just tuned them out we were kind of considering, there was very much this idea of like, you can't say you're white. And we were like,
and
no.
It's so cringe, And I think it's really interesting also in retrospect to compare the criticism and grief that we got versus the white men who copied us. Like they were funny and we were cringe.
We were cringe. Well, we raised a lot more. And one time they used this, they had all these graphics on the screen. The whole thing looked like CNN meets like Sports Center on crack. There were like so many graphics on the screen. And so they had this company do it. And then I became the queen of the Zoom calls. And as I was planning a Zoom call with another organization, they were like, these people reached out to us. They could do graphics for our call. Let's get on a call with them. So we're getting on a call with them. And they're like, you raise so much more with these graphics. I'm like, really? I've been doing this all summer. I don't need a graphic to raise. You just write a good script and get good people and publicize it well. And then they were like, well, we did the white dudes call and that call raised more than any other calls. And I was like, that's not true. Like they didn't know that I had done the white women call.
We went spider monkey.
Yeah, we went insane.
I love it.
Yeah, we don't like that. We don't like that org. So it was very exciting. It then led us to do our Women Wednesdays. We then got to be big ballers at the convention, because we were the biggest raisers. Well,
the funniest part about this whole story is that we didn't realize how big the call would be. And so we just used my Razor link.
Oh, yeah.
My personal Razor link.
Well, we kind of did it on purpose because we didn't want to go through ActBlue because we wanted to be tracked to us. And they assured us that they created like one specific
They had the
for
capacity.
This call. Yeah, they were like, it'll be fine. And I kept saying, I think even we were working with Indivisible and they said, all right, we've got like over 100,000 people registered. I think 70,000 people were registered like an hour before the call. And they go, but we always get a 50% flake rate. I'm like, no one's going to flake. And we had over 200,000 people. People were like streaming it on their Instagram, like, cause like their friends couldn't get on. So they were like streaming it live on their Instagram.
And it kept crashing and coming back up and crashing and coming back up. And we were told at the end of the call, we had only raised $2 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Because so Zoom kept crashing, but then the links, the Razor links kept where you would donate kept crashing. And people were like trying to get on, and it was processing really slowly. It was processing 100 credit card transactions per second, but it was not nearly enough. And so when the call ended, they were like, you've raised $2 million, but there's still a lot in the queue. And we were like, how much? Like,
my reaction was, wow, white women are really cheap.
I mean, that's not entirely
well,
false.
it was, well, in this
but
case,
in that case,
it was not.
But think about it. That's like 3 stadiums worth of Taylor Swift Eras Tour shows of people.
That to me.
That's a crazy.
They said
like,
you just spoke to more people than Taylor Swift ever has, and I was like, oh my god. And we talked about this on when Ariel Miss Frazzled came on, because like we always say that like Trump is kind of obsessed with her, and so is Elon. They're always like subtweeting her, and
so crazy.
And she obviously it went viral in all the wrong ways. Her portion, they got very angry about that. But I remember right after it ended, I was in New Jersey at my in-laws, and my mom called me, and I was like out in the backyard, and she goes, tomorrow Trump is going to wake up and they're going to tell him about this, and he's going to be really mad. That like made me very emotional, probably because he fucking won anyway. So
moving on.
Not all white women listened.
Not all white women listen. And so that brings us to our next thing. I convinced you that we needed to go to DC because this election was our group project and we needed to go hand it in together. And I was so wrong. Similar to
you
the
mean
Biden
for
thing.
the party?
Yeah.
Or do you mean for the DNC?
No,
like
for the party in November.
Oh, like
that was
the
real
convention.
That was
we had the best
slightly
time.
less depressing than the Hillary Clinton lost party that I went to.
Yeah. The convention was a high, and then the whole rest of the campaign, we had our Women Wednesdays, and it felt like there was so much excitement and momentum. It felt like people were continuously showing up and doing the work. We were knocking doors, but obviously, as we say all the time, we were just on the wrong battlefield. And so I
do think we should take credit for the fact that at least college-educated white women did 5 percentage points better with Harris than Biden.
That was all us.
Yeah, I love it. Go college-educated white women.
I claim those 5 points. That's what I think about sometimes when I want to cry, like just before when I wanted to cry.
I mean,
because it really felt like after that call, it was like we felt unstoppable was the vibe, like, and just so much came together, and it just even like my best friend was staying with us for the weekend with her family, and she was like, this is like, you'll always remember this day, like this is going to change the election. So let's now go to Crying at the Conrad. How do you
Crying at the Conrad?
Yeah,
that should be the name of your memoir.
Crying in the Conrad.
Yeah. Shoot, but Shannon wasn't crying. Virginia weren't crying. They were both.
I had some tears.
Okay. They're like,
just
Liz,
utter shock.
get it together.
I was in shock.
How do you, in times, because Moms Demand has so many successes, but there were also difficult times when you didn't get bills passed. How did you, after November, what were your pillars of resilience? You seemed okay, and how did you do that?
Well, honestly, I think nothing could have topped the shock I had in 2016. I mean, I was, at the so-called party, and when I saw the results come in at 9, I knew we were toast. And I never imagined that was a scenario that could be the outcome. And so I just was devastated for weeks. I mean, I had a really, really hard time. And I think because I'd been through that, I was sort of stealing myself a little bit. But also, I knew the work was just beginning. When we lost, that outcome meant that for some people, I heard this reaction, even, famous people and activists saying like, okay, well, that's it. We didn't win. And I give up kind of, or I'm not going to talk to the people who I think voted the wrong way. And just, I don't think, going back to this conversation about privileged white women, like, I don't think that's an option for us. We don't get to quit because we lost, because we're not the ones who are going to be suffering. So, I'm the mom of a trans kid, and there's so many reasons that I felt like, okay, that's over. Now we got to prepare for whatever's next.
Yeah, we just pick ourselves up and live to fight another day. And could we ever have imagined that it's as bad as it's been?
No.
I thought a lot about how I would feel if we lost. I don't think I thought how I would feel in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency.
I thought it would be like the last administration. I really did. Like, I know he promised to do all these things, but he promised to do a lot of weird shit in the last one. And this is, now he knows what he's doing. He has a team that knows what they're doing. They know how to implement their sinister agenda. And it's going to take
past 4 years planning for this. Like, and that brings me to, it feels like we're playing a lot of defense, which we should be, but I always just keep thinking, who's playing offense? Like, who within the party that's like, is there someone, because the people that were drafting the Mandate for Leadership Project 2025, like, that wasn't publicized at all until someone found it and started talking about it, right? So, like, I haven't heard of anyone that's
drafting our mandate
or drafting. What do we even believe in as a party? Like,
yeah, let's get into shit talking.
Yeah, well, I fear that in the immense amount of defense that we're playing, that there's no one that's really playing offense. And there was some interview that came out that was asking, like, Democrats, if you won, what's the first thing you would do when you get into office? Like, what's the first bill you would pass? And they said, like, oh, I don't know. But then you ask Republicans what's the first bill that they'd pass, and they're like, actually, here's our mandate for leadership. Like, it's the moves that we're making as a party don't instill confidence, and it's all performative, and it can be performative right now because that's all we have. But where's the substance?
Yeah. You've been critical of Democratic lawmakers, and sometimes your criticism has been met with similar flack that we kind of got back in 2024 with the Republicans inserting themselves into the GVP movement, which was a lot of, hey guys, same team. What are your thoughts on that?
It's very difficult to be nuanced, especially when a lot of these conversations and debates take place online. I think it is fair to say that the Democratic Party was not prepared to meet the moment. And they had a lot of time between November and January to get prepared in some way to do something and to be cohesive. And I'm still shocked to this moment sitting in this chair. Like in the last week, Democrats continue to vote for Trump's appointees or his agenda in some way. And to me, if you're in the opposition party, your job is to oppose. And this is clearly a very dark person in a very dark time in our nation's history. And so I don't understand, if you are not prepared to fight, if you are not fighting, who you are and what you think you're doing right now in Congress. I'm disappointed in the media. I'm disappointed in members of Congress. I'm disappointed in a lot of my fellow activists. But that doesn't mean that I don't support the party. And it doesn't mean that I think we should primary Democrats in the party. Like, there has to be nuance, which is, yes, I want our elected officials to fight, but I also want to win the House and not allow Donald Trump to have continued free reign.
Yeah, that's a good segue. It seems that our party and our party leadership and our infrastructure is in a bit of disarray right now. Something that has been getting a lot of attention recently is the DNC's Credentials Committee just voted to void the election of David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta as vice chairs due to a complaint, a suit that was bought from one of the losing candidates. Her name is Kaylin Free. That happened in February. So the elections happened, and then she immediately brought this complaint. So the timeline here is important. I'm going to take us through a little bit of a story.
Also, the complaint was that David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta's name were on the same piece of paper.
Correct.
Right? And so instead of people voting for them individually, they voted for them on like a joint ticket.
So she basically said that the DNC did not follow their own parliamentary procedures, and the parliamentarian messed up during the voting process. So when it got to the vice chair vote, which was the last vote, there were 2 vice chair seats. The rules said they need to vote for vice chair seat number 1. Okay, here are the 4 people running. Everybody vote. The person with the highest number of votes, you are now chair number 1. Now it's time to vote for chair number 2. There are 3 people left. You guys all vote, and the person with the highest number of votes, congratulations, you've won. Now there's also this thing that at least one of those, it was 2 women and 2 men that were running for vice chair, at least one of those, because of gender parity rules within DNC leadership, had to be a man. So she argues that it was done incorrectly, and had they done it the right way, that she would have had a better shot, and it would have been more fair. Her argument was correct in that they did not follow their own rules. So that is why the committee voted to redo the vote. So the vote will be redone. So this all happened back in late February, early March. No, I think it was all in February, including the complaint by Caitlin. In April, David Hogg started talking about how he, as the head of his PAC, Leaders We Deserve, wanted to invest $20 million into primarying Democrats in safe blue seats. These do-nothing Democrats who have just taken their seat for granted, have overstayed their welcome. There are elements of that I really agree with. However, one of the biggest issues that has plagued the DNC and plagued our party since 2015 is that we are seen to be putting a finger on the scale, whether that's through donors or preferential treatment, the way we hold debates, just everything. And the DNC and Ken Martin is really committed to reforming that and remaining extremely neutral in primaries. So to have someone in leadership say they're going to launch this whole crusade backed by $20 million is so antithetical to that pledge of neutrality. And while there are not specific rules in the DNC leadership charter that prohibit you from participating as an individual in primaries, it's like, don't be an asshole. And the reason why there aren't specific rules is, so let's say I'm DNC vice chair and my friend Patrick, who's running for Illinois State Senate, invites me to his barbecue. Like, oh, sorry, I can't go because you're running and I'm DNC leadership and I don't want to look like I'm part of a primary. So that's why there aren't like explicit rules, because it's like people work together. These are people's like personal friends, or perhaps, give them $50. It's not that big a deal. Don't give them $20 million. Like, the rules are written the way they are because there's an understanding that you're not going to be an asshole. And when the chair says, he came out and he was like, David, don't do this. This is antithetical to all the reform we're trying to do. He was like, no. And also, sorry, this is like very long, but now David is taking this complaint by Kaylin and turning it to make it seem like it's is something that they're doing as a way to move him out because of his pledge to primary these people. And that's like, it's a lie. It is not true.
Yep.
So do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say first and foremost, if you want to run a PAC, great. My understanding is that there's something like 2 million or less in it. I don't think he has 20 million to spend. But if you're going to run a PAC, then you can't run to be an elected official for the DNC and support all the candidates. You can't do those two things. And it's pretty apparent to me, and I think to others, that David ran for this elected office, knowing that it would help him boost his PAC. Because as soon as he does anything, he's promoting his PAC about something he's done at the DNC. And I think, that is ethically dubious. He is being paid out of that PAC about $200,000 a year. And so he has a motive to continue to bifurcate the party. And that is not healthy and it's not helpful. And, David had a lot of goodwill as a gun violence survivor working on the issue of gun safety. And I admire him and his voice. But, this turn that I've seen him take, I don't think it speaks well to his integrity.
I do want to, I always try to look at how this is playing. Right now, Malcolm and David Hogg are the two youngest, by far, people within the Democratic establishment. And we all know that those people don't pay attention to all of the context and the nuance, right? So whoever the PR team is for the DNC, I feel as though they put themselves in a lose-lose situation because now you have all of these really young people that lean progressive, men and women, that are looking at this entire situation and being like, okay, well, David's trying to get people in office that look like me, that sound like me, that care about me. There's all these old people that aren't doing anything in office. And so finally, someone's doing what everyone says they're going to be doing. And now he's being punished for doing that without taking the time, because that's just the society that we live in, to understand all of this nuance, right? And so, and I don't totally agree with the fact that we should be letting Democrats that are dinosaurs stay in office. I think that they're obviously term limits is something that's going to be off the table for a very long time. But sometimes I think primarying these Democrats are the only way that we're going to get people that are in our millennial.
Right. So if he wanted to do that, great for you. But he knew that he wouldn't be as successful doing that if he didn't have this added layer of, he knew that this tension, I call him the Bethany Frankel of the Democratic Party, because he knows, like Chris Hayes' book that we have here, The Siren's Call, attention is the greatest resource of the 21st century. He knew that if he did this dichotomy and this conflict would lead to more attention for him, more bookings on talk shows, and more money in his PAC. It actually is. Let me just,
two things. One is, I think it's really important that when we're having this conversation, as someone who's 54, that we be careful about ageism, because there are many wise, amazing people who we should encourage to run for office later in life. The new mayor of Omaha is a 64-year-old man. And I think that to write people off because of their age is unproductive. I don't see many people running for the first time in their 70s and 80s. I think the real issue here is that people are hoarding power.
Yes.
That they get into office in their 30s and 40s, like Nancy Pelosi, and they don't leave. And I don't know if that's specific to the boomer generation or if that's just the dynamic of power, but that is what we should be discouraging. I mentioned that every year when I was at Moms Demand Action, I asked myself, is it time to leave? And I think members of Congress should be doing the exact same thing. And that's why I do think primaries are good. When a fascist is not in power, I don't understand investing millions and millions of dollars to primary people who are sitting in safe seats and they're, not running when they're dying of cancer. I don't understand that either. Like several of the Democrats who recently died knew that they had been diagnosed with a horrific illness and still ran anyway. But I do think we have to win. And if that $20 million means we pick up some seats in some swing states, then I'm going to be real mad about primarying Democrats in the midterms when we should really be trying to get more seats. So there's, to everything, there is nuance. But I also want to point out that the first thing that David said about his strategy, the very first thing he said, is that he wasn't going to primary Pelosi or Schakowsky. Two white women in their 80s being primaried by younger people of color.
Yeah.
Why not Pelosi or Schakowsky?
Because his donors like
Christine Pelosi runs the DNC votes.
Yeah.
And I would assume, so this becomes David's personal wish list.
Right.
Of who is in the party and who's not, even though he's an elected official who should be neutral.
Yeah.
And not an overall primarying strategy that benefits Americans.
Exactly. And what it all boils down to is the entire strategy and everything he's doing. What he's really bad at is hiding. A lot of people in politics are self-serving. A lot of people in politics want to raise money for the thing that they're doing. He's really bad at hiding that agenda. It's so obvious. Like I think first and foremost, David thinks about David, and he thinks about the Democratic Party second. And I'm not saying he's unique in that. I think there are a lot of people who do put party first. I think Ken Martin is not a person who's like out for himself. I think he has spent decades creating relationships, and it's upsetting that I know you said like the DNC needs a better PR strategy. I mean, David is his own. He's like this PR machine, and he's dominating the narrative.
I also was gonna say, I think that if the DNC is looking for any free advice, I would, like hand in hand with announcing or talking about how they're going to hold these re-elections, I would probably, if I were Ken Martin, say, and now that we're on the topic, we're actually going to talk about rewriting our bylaws so that our co-chairs and our establishment party represents the demographics of our nation.
He did say exactly that.
I didn't see that.
And but the problem is like he is not as skilled at getting on every talk show. The reason why we know all the things that David says is because he's literally like shoved in our face and sending out emails like the day that decision came down about the committee saying we're going to void the seats, he sent out a fundraising email that said they're all pissed at me. Like he knows how to dominate the narrative, and he's kind of shameless, and so nobody else is able to get out the truth. It's like how Cory Booker says, like, if you have 100 people in the room and 99 of them are screaming lie, you're not going to hear the one person screaming truth. Like he has built his own like media machine.
But who, like, the DNC is full of media people that love sending text messages. Like I got like 3 of them today. Like, why is not one of those text messages targeted towards that? I feel like they're off base on what and how they should be communicating. And I feel like to Gen Z and millennials, it's just,
they should take a page out of his book.
Full of just people being like, they don't care about us. Like, every time I look at Congress, there's barely anyone that represents us. They always talk about Maxwell Frost. They always talk about AOC. Like, people that have, like, really, like, that are, and who else? Oh, Yasmin Ansari. She's great, too. Like, there's a lot of really great people that represent the younger generations.
It feels like we're at a very difficult time in our party, and that actually kind of tees up my last question for you perfectly, which is if you had a magic wand and you could fix anything about the Democratic Party, or you could do one thing that you think would set us on a better trajectory to win in 26 and 28, pass more gun violence prevention legislation, protect trans kids, all of the things on our wish list, like, what are we missing here? What would you ask a genie?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of what we talked about, which is the Democratic Party needs a strategy and it needs a captain. I don't know who the leader of the party is right now.
I don't think the party knows who the leader of the party is.
No, we're in turmoil. I'm not saying that's bad. You know, I think the silver lining of all this is that there might be leaders who rise to the top that we never thought of as leaders.
Totally.
And there will be people who decide to run because they can't sit on the sidelines anymore. But we have to, it is not a dig on any specific candidate when I say we have to learn to talk authentically and meet the moment and talk to people where they are on platforms they're at and in a way that feels authentic and powerful to them. And whatever you want to say about Donald Trump, he knows how to do that. His team knows how to do that. He did it masterfully. He is a once in a lifetime or generation politician. As much as I despise him, I understand why he won, because if you look at fascist dictators in the past, that's how they won too. They're usually funny, they're charismatic, they say whatever they want and don't worry about the consequences. They seem like people that other people can relate to, even though they're liars, even though they're corrupt grifters. And I'm not asking the Democratic Party to be that, but we have to stop thinking that we're living in the political landscape from even a decade ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yes, that is the biggest thing. I think we're trying to win elections like it's 2012. And that was the thing about the Harris campaign. We ran a great campaign for 2012. We would have definitely won.
Whoever writes our agenda for the next Democratic president, I really hope they don't call it Project 2029. I hate that. Like, let's get a little bit more original.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, we need a Project 2029. I'm like, we need to think and have our own unique thoughts.
Yeah, it's the same. We need a Joe Rogan of the left.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if it were that simple, it's a lot more nuanced. And that is a great answer. I'm so excited to have you in town in a couple of weeks. Yeah. You have a whirlwind book tour. So if you are not in the Chicagoland area, go to firedupbook.com. And she is in a city near you, I guarantee.
So many cities.
So many cities.
Get those miles.
Yeah. And you were like back to back.
Yep.
I was like, I'm praying to the FAA gods for you.
Thank you.
And because, as we know, there are no airline issues right now.
No, I'll be flying through Newark everywhere.
Go totally smoothly. June 24th, you'll be in the Chicagoland area. So please come out and see us and say hi and get your signed book. And I'm just excited to be on this journey with you. I know that this is just the first chapter of many. We started out with a bang, and it was a tough defeat, but as you said, we like rise from the ashes onto the next, and who knows what random piece of technology will break in the 28 cycle.
Let's just get through the midterms in 500 days.
Yes.
500 days.
500 days.
Damn.
Yeah, and then we'll go
get to work.
Break. Well, thank you. I love you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Shannon.
And everyone, get your book.
Yeah.